Today I want to talk about the real reason why I ride these old Evo Harley-Davidsons, and I think you might be surprised. I guess it started off in the late 80s when I was in my 20s, when I got my first old cast iron Sportster, which kind of fell in my lap. And after riding it a while, I got addicted to the untamed wild feeling it had. My Suzuki before it didn't offer any of that at all. This thing felt like it was alive. And in time, I found that I really couldn't get that much pleasure from the smooth, calm, tame bikes. So there was that. The other thing is I like the Harley thing. So there's that too, but that is not really the reason I ride these old things. And in order to tell you about that, I'm going to have to go back in time quite a ways and tell you a little bit of the experiences I had. Okay, now when I was a young man, nobody made payments on a vehicle. I used to buy old trucks for $500 for my job, and then I'd ride them, fix what they drive them, fix what they needed, and then when something big happened with them, I'd get another one. I think you could get something really nice for like $3,500, of course, which was more money back then, but I was making $450 a week in my job. So my vehicle wasn't a real big part of it, and from everybody I knew, nobody made payments on a vehicle. Now these things were simple. You could fix them under the shade tree. They had auto shop in school. My father used to do some major work back out in the garage behind us because you didn't need to be a tech or a computer expert because the things were so simple. And so driving was not a major part of your expense, man. Nobody I knew, it wasn't. It was just you bought a car. Now this was, or a truck or whatever. Now this was not good for the people that manufacture them and the people that sell them. And those guys knew that they had something that we would give our left nut for if they could move us into a position to do it. See, the best thing for them is if each one of us gives them $300 or $400 a month every month for the rest of our life. That's the best. That's what they want. And so what they did was they began to complicate the vehicles. And my friends said, they're trying to take our independence away from us. And I thought that was true. And then a lot of the people I knew began to embrace this. And I'd come back to San Diego, some of the old Harley riders, right? And, I'd run into one of my old buddies, and he'd be telling me, mechanic, and I don't do that anymore. I just stay in my cubicle and make my payments. And to me, it was like that old movie, Attack of the Body Snatchers, if any of you guys are old enough to remember that. And I was like, whoa, Bob, you're one of the guys who used to sit around with the rest of us over there at Joe's house when we went on rides on the weekends, and we did stuff to our bikes, and we traded parts, and we helped each other out, man. What happened to you? So one of the things that happened was back in those days, you expected to get the simple vehicles. You expected to get 100,000 miles or so out of a motor before it was time for a rebuild. Now you're expecting to get 250,000 miles. So what's the difference? Well, I'm here to tell you it wasn't the complication at all. That had nothing to do with it. It was the difference in metallurgies. They came out with much better metals, and the machining processes, those CNC machines, are able to make stuff real nice. If I hold an Evo cylinder in one hand and a shovel head cylinder in the other, the Evo cylinder makes the shovel cylinder look like an old cast iron stove. It's just much more refined, much lighter, made out of a much better metal, aluminum. And if I hold an Evo cylinder in one hand and a twin cam cylinder in the other hand, it's similar. There's similar differences. The machining process has got even better. So let's move on to what happened with the motorcycles, and in particular Harley. And the old motorcycles were all mechanically unsound. You had to have a wrench in your pocket, and you had to know how to use it to ride them. I mean, the early cars were that way too. And then in the late 60s and the superbiking 70s, the Japanese started coming out with these designs. They were different designs. Some of them offered more power, but what they really did was they brought longevity, reliability into the motorcycle world, which had not existed before. And nobody wants to work on their shit all the time. And so what happened was the Japanese ruled back then, and all the other guys went out of business. Norton Triumph BSA, the bikes of that day, went under. Indian had died in the early 50s, I'm not sure when exactly, by their own hand, I'm told, and Harley was almost gone. And in order to make a comeback, one of the things Harley did was they had to build something that would compete. They had to bring in something that was reliable, right? And they came out with the Evolution, so named, because it was supposed to have evolved to compete with the new era of motorcycles that the Japanese brought ushered in. And it was built for one thing and one thing only, and that was to last. That was to not fall apart. And all the advertising on it back then was, this thing won't break down, won't leak oil, won't overheat. All problems that plagued the old bikes, right? They didn't talk about power because it didn't have a lot of power. That's not exactly what it was made for. But there were no shortcuts taken in it. It had to last and it had to work. It was a do or die thing. And what happened is it was very successful. And when I began to see my friends riding them, and I'm going to tell you something, the Evos back in those days broke down less than the new Harleys do these days. I was there. I saw it. The problem you have with these old bikes now is they're all 30 fucking years old. And they have the problems of really old bikes. And a lot of people molest them. We're always molesting our Harleys. And so, you know, that's the problem with them now. But back then, I was amazed. I watched my friends had them, and they were just riding them and not working on them. And I thought, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try, because I was going to get a Goldwing, man. 'Cause I was talking about it because I wanted to travel. And the bikes I had weren't really too great for that. And so I got my hands on a 1987 Softail. It was 1990 when I got it, so it was not very old, with 13,400 miles on it when I got it. And that thing, it was 84,000 miles before it had its first problem. It was amazing. I started taking these long trips and doing nothing but, you know, putting on tires and an occasional battery. We had water batteries back then, right? The Evos worked, and they worked really well. I was extremely impressed. But my thoughts were, see, in the old days, what happened was when you wore your top end out on your shovel or your Sportster or whatever you had in 40,000 miles or 50 or whatever it was, you pulled the thing apart because it was simple. You didn't need a technician to work on it. You sent the parts out to the machinist, and then you got them back and you put it back together because you didn't have to be a tech to do it. Just a little mechanical know-how. And so my thinking was, when it comes time, am I going to be able to do that with the Evo? And the first time I started taking one apart, I was amazed. I was just like, this is hillbilly shit here, man. So what I found out is not only the Evo one of the longest lasting things Harley ever built, but it is also the simplest damn thing they ever built. It's simpler and has less moving parts than a panhead or a knucklehead. I'm not sure about a flathead. The flathead has all them gears on the right side. It may even has less moving parts. And in some ways, it's easier to work on than a shovel head, which is what it was based on. So it brought me all of the benefits of both worlds. I got 1970s technology, or late 70s, I would say, something like that, along with modern longevity. That's what keeps me in them. It's my bike. I can do whatever I want with it. That's the way we were back then, right? And, you know, when I was in my 20s, I made this decision. I made it just like this. I decided that there's 3 ways to drive. One is you get the new vehicle, you make the payments, you stay in your cubicle and keep paying. They give you a warranty. Then when the thing finally gets worn out, you trade it in, you get another one. The other way is you get a used vehicle and you pay somebody else to fix it. And the third way is you get a used vehicle and you learn to fix it yourself. And I consciously, at that time, chose number 3. I mean, you're going to pay one way or the other, right? Nowadays, there are not that many guys who do their own work at all or know anything about machines. But I'm here to tell you guys, it's not because of lack of mechanical ability. There's a lot of guys who have mechanical ability, and there's those who don't. But plenty of them have latent, what they call it, latent mechanical abilities. It's just that they've been slam dunked and buried under all this complication. There's many, many, many of us, as used to be done in the old days, who could repair, fix, and take care of our own stuff until they took that opportunity away. It was purposely bled out of us in the interest of them making more money. So the Evos, man, those years were simple. Everybody did everything. People did their own stuff. That was all through the 90s. And everything was a fucking Evo. And then the twin cam came out. So I was watching this. First one I saw was in Oregon at a motorcycle rally, and I was watching them and to see what happened with them. And what happened right away was they started breaking. They started having problems in the cam chest and the cam chain tensioners. I was not impressed with that. Then I come to learn that the reason that they put chains in them to begin with, no Harley motor ever had a chain in it before, was because they were using pressed together cranks. Because the deal with crankshafts is, without bothering to get into it, is they have to be trued by human hands. It's kind of a tedious process. It takes somebody that knows what they're doing. They have to have a truing stand. And the specs for mine, and probably all the older ones too, is up to 3 thousandths run out. That's all that's allowed. So you got to keep banging with it. Most guys try to get it to 1.5 thousandths before they put them in. Well, with the twin cams, they started pressing the cases together, having a robot do it. And the thing about the robot is the robot cannot get them straight, not like human hands can. So they eliminated some people. It was kind of a fucking cheap shot as far as I was concerned. And they've let the run out go out now to, I think, it's 12 or 14 thousandths. They allow it to go out. And the reason you can't have gears in there is because this makes the shaft coming out the end of the engine move somewhat like a bicycle pedal. A very small amount, but that's what it does. I won't get into it all. But what it does is it breaks fucking gears. So their answer to it was to put in bicycle chains. I was not impressed with that. The other thing they did was, it was sometime in the early 50s, Harley had a problem with their cranks moving back and forth. And they came out with this dual Timken bearing setup that goes in the left case, and it solved the problem, man. It worked really good. And they used it right up to 2002. The old Harleys, the old twin cams actually have it, 2002 and before. But in 2003, the bean counters got in there and had them take it out. Why? Because each one of those has to be set up by human hands. They can't do it with a fucking robot. And they went back to using roller bearings like they used before, which doesn't seem to be a problem. Because, you know, I have friends that have a lot of miles on twin cams, and the twin cams do have more power. They really do. They were designed to have more of that. But these cheap shots did not impress me. There's kits, I think even Harley has one, where you can put the Timken bearings back into your twin cam. But this is major engine work. And it doesn't seem to be a problem with basically stock motors. But it's just a cheap shot. So I was not impressed with all of these cheap shots they were doing. So I'm not saying they're bad motors, because I've seen them with a lot of miles on them. They've proved themselves, and what's happened is they've kept improving them. The Evo didn't have any problems when it was new except for two. One was the intake manifold was defective. They tried to copy the Chaps with the compliance fittings. Well, they got rid of that and started using the intake manifolds they use now. They even use pretty much the same thing, it looks like to me, on the fuel injected models. And the other thing was the base gasket leaks. Some of these motors, the base gasket in the rear just leaks, and there ain't much you can do to stop it. And not all the motors do that. I'm not sure why. There's different ideas on why this particular one and this bike doesn't do it. It's not a big deal. They never did fix that. It can look like it's leaking a lot when you first start it up, but the cylinders are made out of aluminum and they stretch once they get hot. So if you ride it a little bit and then look down, you may notice it ain't leaking so much. My solution to that is, if you don't want to see it, is get some brake cleaner and just spray it off of there periodically. Anyways, so that's what keeps me in the Evos. I was in a Harley dealership a while back, just hanging around, drinking coffee. I think I was using their internet. And I started talking with the salesman. And I said, you know, what's it cost for a new bike like mine? You know, a bagger like this. And he said, well, he gave me a price of right around 30 grand. You know, and that's where it starts, right? I said to him, I said, you know, I got a question about that motorcycle. He said, what is it? And I wish I'd have got a picture of his face, because he was kind of shocked when I said it. I said, look, man, can you get on that thing here, start it up, drive it over there, park it, and get off it? He said, well, yeah. I said, well, good. Then it can do the exact same thing as every other vehicle on the road. That's what they all do. And he jumped. And I was like, you know, that's what they do. They take you from here to there. You know, I've had a few friends who have gotten these old bikes thinking that they would get the benefit that I get. But what happened was they really didn't, because they weren't guys that worked on their own bikes anyway. And so it really wasn't worth it for them. So, you know, some guys work on their stuff and some guys don't. And there's those who just don't have any mechanical ability at all. Their talents are in other things. And if you're not going to work on the bike yourself, they're not worth it. I have guys call me up and ask me once in a while, what bike should I get? And I tell them, I'm like, if you're not going to do the work on it yourself, especially if you're using it under normal conditions where they don't break down as often because you're not crossing the country all the time, I tell them you're probably better off to go with something more modern, because these old ones don't have the performance that the new ones do. And I've had a few friends who've gone to Evos and then gone back to twin cams. I did have one. He went from a Milwaukee 8 to a 98 bagger like this with a carburetor on it, and he told me he would never go back. So what I'm saying is they're only of good benefit for guys who mess with their own stuff. And for us, for the guys who do that, they're totally worth it. And that is what's kept me in the Evos. Modern longevity with 70s technology. After that last video, people started asking me where they could get Silvia's half chaps or those leggings that she makes. So we're going to get to that in a minute, because I found out where you can get a set if you want them. I got a hold of her. But first, I want to tell you that we're going to have the Gypsy Gene Cancer Run, of course, that I've been announcing. That's going to be in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And on this one, I'm just going to leave you a flyer to it. You guys can call up Cornbread and ask him. He says he's been getting calls about it. So he's pretty happy about that. So anyways, back to Silvia's half chaps. She sent me some of these pictures, and she gave her information, which is Facebook. That's how you get a hold of her, which I've left the link down below. It'll be the first one down there. No commissions involved. It's just kind of a favor to her. And before I go, I want to tell you guys that not only am I here on Censor YouTube, but I am also on these other channels. And if you go over there and just search my name, those channels are uncensored. Sometimes my videos are a little different over there because I don't have to worry about copyrighted music or what I say or anything like that. So it's not always the same thing. And it's a great place to go for information, because everything that I look up, once I watch this mainstream stuff, and I'll tell you what, ain't none of it true. Ain't none of it. I'm like, what a bullshit job. But the guys who go over there, they all know what's really going on. And you can see it in the comments, because they know the truth of what's happening in our world. Anyway, so that's there. And with that, I will see you guys on the next video.